Okay, first mid-air collision that I had was on a sortie where I was leading an 18 aircraft formation out of Caldershall, heading for the ranges in Northumbria. Because there were so many airplanes to get airborne, we had a procedure whereby we chopped automatically to departure frequency instead of clogging up the tower frequency with radio calls. Unfortunately, my number two didn't. He had a minor problem after takeoff which distracted him, didn't change his radios. We headed out towards the North Norfolk coast, and air traffic told me about a contact that was at our 12 o'clock. Unfortunately, they got myself and my wingman mixed up, so they were calling it in front of the wrong airplane. And my number two could see it perfectly well, but he was shouting about it on the wrong frequency. And when I'd finished looking for it in front of him, I looked forward to find my windscreen full of tornado.
Oh.
And there was a thump. I wouldn't put it at any more than that. As we passed, I knew it hit something, but I thought perhaps not terminally. And indeed, it seemed to fly quite well for a couple of seconds, and then it yawed violently, which I subsequently, I kicked it back. And it yawed violently the other way, and I subsequently learned that was when the tail had come off. And it went into a sort of dirty death spiral, starting only at 1,000 feet. I have to confess that I thought that pulling the seat handle was just a token, and that it wasn't going to do any good. I was so far outside the seat parameters, but I pulled it anyway. I remember that I still had my hands on the throttles when I went up the rails, and I had two swings in the parachute before I hit the sea like a sack of spuds, and then did a bit of sunbathing on top of my dinghy until the helicopter came to pick us up.
Was there a story about the helicopter?
Yes,
That's to clear this up.
it has many apocryphal nuances, variations, but essentially what happened was that I knew I'd hit a tornado. The tornado did not know that it hit a Jaguar. It eventually became unflyable, and the tornado crew leapt out. I was heading out to sea and went into the sea. They were heading inland and jumped out overland. In compliance with established procedure, the survivor in the sea is the priority. So the helicopter came for me and picked me up, and I clambered into the back of it, where I was met by this fierce lady doctor from Caldershall, who told me to sit still, shut up, and not get in people's way while we went to find the tornado crew. As usual, I ignored this, so when we landed to pick up the tornado crew, I sort of got out of the airplane, and there I was, dripping wet. And we were put back in the helicopter and flown back to Caldershall, where it was very noisy and we had no intercom. So it wasn't until we got into the medical centre at Caldershall that I was able to hear what the tornado pilot, who I did know, was saying, and he said, "You must have thought that I looked really stupid when I came across the field to meet you." He said, "I was there, and this helicopter landed, and out of this helicopter got a wet figure." And I looked at it and thought, "That's Tim Jones. How long's he been on helicopters?" And then I looked and saw the water dripping off, and I thought, "My God, he must be a winchman."
So that's it.
That's it.
Brilliant. You also had another incident, didn't you?
Yeah, the first one was on my first tour, and then about halfway through my second tour, I was flying in a pair with a bounce. We were approaching the Hexham Gap, the Tyne Valley near Hexham, and the two of us were progressing there. You're not allowed to bounce in that area, so the bounce was out and watching what was going on. And as I descended into the Tyne Valley, I saw just what appeared to be a grey blur, come down my left-hand side. Felt a minor thump, and I transmitted to the bounce pilot, I think I've hit something, and thinking it was a bird, and he said, yeah, it's just crashed behind you. So I thought, some bird. He came and inspected the damage, and basically I'd lost a lump of the left wing. The airplane still flew. I thought about going to Newcastle, which was the nearest diversion, but they had no wires or barriers, and also the ground staff there would have been unfamiliar with military aircraft. So Leeming was the best option. There was a fuel leak from the left-hand side, principally because there was a hole in the fuel tank. I can't remember whether the left engine shut down of its own accord or whether I shut it down in order to get the aeroplane stabilised. The one thing I do remember doing of any common sense at all was not to touch the flaps, since the outboard flaps and controls were in something of a second-hand state. And so I was committed to a flapless landing, single engine, in a Jaguar, which is not recommended. And essentially what I had to do was to slow the airplane down on the approach. I wasn't planning on doing an overshoot on one engine, and just see how slow I could get it before the loss of the portion of the wing started making it roll. And I'm told from the audience that assembled in the tower and elsewhere at Leeming that it was quite impressive, over the hedge at something over 200 knots.
Wow.
And thinking that the drag chute would fall off the back because the limiting speed was 150. Well, I threw it out, and it hung on there. So I never even made the departure end cable.
Sounds like you've been very lucky.
Yeah, I think I have.
Well, brilliant. Thanks for sharing, Dim.
Okay.